Hi everyone, welcome and thanks so much for checking out my channel. My name's Tanny and I'm an independent author and someone who just really loves great stories. So on this channel you'll find videos about writing, stories I've enjoyed, and lessons I've learned on my publishing journey. Today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of newer writers sometimes struggle with, and something that I have definitely had to learn to balance and how to deal with, and that is making time for writing. A lot of the time I'll hear people say things like, oh, I have this great idea for a book, but I just don't have the time to write it. Or, man, I wish I had time to write a book, but I'm just so busy. Or my very favorite, you wrote an entire book? Where did you find all the free time? What, like the magical time fairy just swoops in and hands a few extra hours to me every week? Are you seeing a common theme here? Maybe you've even said stuff like that yourself. I know I have, and there were times when that was legitimately true. I get it. I'm busy. I'm a mom. I have a job. I have a house and kids and pets to take care of, and it's not always easy to find time to write. Before I was doing all of that, I was a full-time college student working a part-time internship, still trying to be a parent, and trying to fit in time for writing in the midst of all of that craziness. It just was really hard. There were times when I legitimately had no time to write, but there were also times when I was really just making excuses for myself. The real issue was that I was just not making time to write. Because that's the thing, it's really not so much about finding the time as it is about making the time. It is really hard to write when you have so many other things going on in your life, but those responsibilities probably aren't going to go away overnight. So if you can find a way to work around them and still make time for writing in the midst of everything else you have going on, that's probably going to be your best option for getting any writing done, at least until things calm down in your life a little bit. So with all of that being said, here are my 5 biggest tips for making time to write and fitting it into your life in a way that works for you. Tip number 1. Look at the activities that you're already doing that you can scale back on or cut out in order to have more time for writing. There are a million things out there that are constantly competing for your attention. And it's really easy to just let the time pass by without even realizing where it went. You open up Twitter or Facebook for a few minutes, and pretty soon an entire hour has gone by and you have no idea what you've been doing. You turn on Netflix to watch the latest episode of your favorite TV show, and pretty soon you've binged the entire season. If you want to have time to write, you might have to give some of those things up, at least for a little while. Maybe that means cutting some TV time out of your life, or only watching for half an hour instead of for a whole hour. Maybe it just means scrolling through social media a little less often, and let's be honest, we probably all could use a little less time on social media. Maybe you do what I do and you just give up on the idea of ever having a perfectly immaculate house and use that time that you would have been doing a bunch of chores to write instead. I'm not saying you have to live in a pigsty, but look, to me, writing time is way more important than doing some of those chores every single day, at least to some extent. Just look at how you're currently using your time in a typical day and decide which areas are things that you can maybe cut back on or adapt in your life in order to have a little more time for writing. All right, tip number 2, squeeze it in. Sometimes we writers get into this habit of thinking that we have to wait for inspiration to strike before we can sit down to write. Or we don't want to do any writing until we have a big chunk of time to commit to it. That's fine, but if you're struggling to find time to write, sometimes you just have to take it where you can get it, whether the inspiration is there or not. I definitely used to be one of those people who would only write if I had a really long chunk of time to commit to it and a quiet place to write, and everything was perfect and it was exactly how I wanted it to be. But that's just not the reality of my life anymore. I don't always have that time to do that because I'm a mom, and if kids are really good at one thing, it's taking all of your established routines and perfectly planned out schedules and just chucking that all out the window. Sometimes I've just had to find places where I could squeeze a little extra writing time in. Maybe that means you can write at your kid's soccer practice, or maybe it means you write while you're waiting at the doctor's office for your appointment. If you have a job, maybe you can get a few notes jotted down during your lunch break. If you're in school, you might be able to use the few minutes before or after or between classes to get a little writing done. Or, you could write in class. Not that I've ever done that, ever. You could even write or brainstorm while you're standing at the stove making dinner. Now, are you going to get as much done that way as you would if you just set aside a few hours for writing? No, probably not. But we're not looking at an ideal situation here. We're just looking at trying to find a few extra minutes in a day to get a little bit of extra writing done. Every little bit helps, and progress is still progress no matter how big or small it is. Number 3, stick to a schedule or a word count goal and then reward yourself for meeting that goal. This doesn't always work for everyone, but I do know some writers who it works really well for, and there have been times in my life where it works really well for me. The idea is to pick a scheduled time that you can set aside for writing and then stick to it. You want to make sure that your partner or your roommates or whoever you live with know that that is your writing time and you don't want to be disturbed during that time. For me, I usually write at night after my kids have gone to bed and my husband has gone to work, and I have about an hour or two before I go to bed, and I can just use that time to sit down and really focus on my writing. I try to do that at least a few times a week and sometimes more, just depending on how I'm feeling. I know other writers who wake up really early in the morning so that they can get some writing done before everybody else is awake. Just find a time that works for you and stick to it. Other writers don't really stick to a scheduled time, but they'll have a certain word count goal that they will try to hit every day or every week or every month. So whatever you decide to do, just pick a goal and stick to it, and then reward yourself when you reach that goal. What should your reward be? I don't know. That's totally up to you. Right now, I'm trying to finish up revisions on my young adult fantasy novel, Tethered Spirits, and I have told myself that I am not going to let myself play the new Mass Effect Legendary Edition that is coming out soon until I get those revisions done. That has really motivated me to work hard and get them done as soon as possible so that I can go and play that game, because it's one of my favorites and I'm super excited for it to come out. Just pick something that's meaningful and attainable to you, because goals are hard and you deserve to treat yourself for reaching them. Plus, the positive reinforcement could be a good motivator and make reaching your next goal a little bit easier. Tip number 4, be committed. Look, all the tips and tricks in the world aren't going to do you any good unless you're actually committed to writing. Writing is hard, it's fun, and it's exciting, and it's something you should be passionate about, but it's not always sunshine and rainbows. At some point, you might have to push through the parts that are hard and just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't sit there and whine about not having enough time to write. Just sit down and get those words onto the page. Tip number 5, and this one is the most important. Be kind to yourself. There are bound to be situations that come up that just make it impossible to write. Maybe you're already doing all the things that I mentioned previously and you still just don't have time. I've been there and it sucks, but sometimes that's just life. Writing is great, but there are a lot of things that are more important than writing that sometimes have to take a priority, including your mental health. So be nice to yourself. If you really don't have time, or if you just don't have the energy to write for a few days or a few weeks or even a few years, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you don't get to call yourself a writer anymore. Maybe it just means you're struggling right now, and that's okay. Just do the best you can and give yourself room to fall short sometimes. Because even though it's hard, this writing thing should really be something that you have fun with and that you enjoy. And if it's not that for you, then it's just not worth it. So don't pressure yourself too much. Just make time for writing wherever you can and however you can, while also making sure to take care of your own mental health and emotional well-being. Those are all the tips and tricks I have for you today. A lot of those have worked really well for me to make time for writing in my own life, but I would love to hear from you guys how you've managed to make time for writing in your life. Be sure to leave a comment down below to let me know, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.